Okay, so we're now going to work through the second half of the Intermediate Maths Paper 1 from November 2018. We've got up in the first chunk to the end of question 9, so we're now coming into the Grade C and Grade B topics. So, bit of algebra. First of all, expand. Expand means get rid of the brackets. What you need to remember when you get rid of brackets is you multiply. So you're taking whatever's outside the bracket and multiplying it by everything that's inside the bracket, each term. So 3x times x squared, well, if you're multiplying something by an x squared, you end up with a cube. So you get 3x cubed, and then you've also got to do the 3 times the negative 2. 3x times 2 is 6x. That's positive, that's negative, the signs are different, the answer is negative. So you get 3x cubed, take 7x, 1 mark for the 3x cubed, 1 mark for the take 6x. Right, we haven't done this in class, but it pretty much follows the rules of solving equations, where what you do to one side, you have to do to the other, and what you want to do is to get whatever they say make the subject of, you want to rearrange it so it's g equals. So if we do this one step at a time, first of all, I don't like negative 3g, so I'm going to add 3g to that side, and that will then mean I've got to add 3g to the left hand side as well. That means on the left hand side now I've got f plus 3g, but on the right hand side I've only got 2 because the 3g has cancelled out. I'm aiming to get the 3g on its own, so I need to get rid of the f. I do that by taking off f. If I take off f off that side, I have to take f off the other side too. That means I'm left with 3g on the left hand side, and on the right hand side 2 take f. And then the final thing to get the g on its own is to divide by 3. In algebra, divide by is over. So g is 2 take f over 3. So if you can get your head around the rules of equations, you can usually pick up some marks there, but as I said, it's not something we've done in class. So there'd be a mark for getting that down to halfway. So the way that I did it, getting you down to 3g equals 2 minus f, and then a final mark for 2 minus f over 3. This follows the same rules as an equation, except instead of an equal sign, we've got a less than sign. So the first thing I want to do to get the x on its own is add 3. If I add 3 to the left hand side, I have to add 3 to the right hand side as well, which leaves me 7x on the left hand side, and 29 add 3 is 32 on the right hand side. The 7 and the x are joined by a times, so to get that on its own I have to divide both sides by 7. Now if you leave it like that, you're going to get your 2 marks. But to answer the second part, it's helpful to turn that into either a decimal or a mixed number. So what I'm saying is, how many times does 7 go into 32? 4 times, which is 28, with 4 out of 7 left over. Or if you want to do it as a division, 7 into 32 goes 4 times, add a decimal point and a 0, and it's a remainder of 4. 7 goes into 40 7 times, etc., etc. The reason that's going to help you is because what this is asking is, what is the greatest integer value? Integer means whole number. What's the biggest whole number that satisfies the above inequality? 4. X is less than this time. If the symbol had been the other way around, if it had been X is more than 4.7, the answer would have been 5.
So if it's equal,
So if it's
got a line
or so if it's more than or equal to,
would it be just 4?
no,
Or would it be 5?
it would still be 5 because it's integer. Yeah, the integer is telling you they want a whole number. So because it's X is less than that, the biggest whole number would be 4. If it was X is greater than that, the smallest whole number would be 5.
Okay.
All right? So for that, there'd be 1 mark for getting it down to 7x equals 32, and 1 mark for 32 over 7, and then 1 mark for that. So, yeah, so you need to be aware of what that means. The inequality always points to the smaller value. Question 11. 2 straight lines, AB and AC, are shown below. The point P is equidistant from the line AB and the line AC. It's 6 centimeters from B and it's more than 10 centimeters from A. Show clearly the position of point P. This now is a construction. Okay? So this is where we have to draw our constructions. So to find out the equal distance between that line and that line, I have to find a line that's exactly halfway between them. So that's an angle bisector. To bisect an angle, you take your compass and you open it out. It doesn't matter how far, there's no measurement, but it's just how far it is to be comfortable to you. So say like that. Put the point at the corner of the angle that you want to cut in half and mark across the 2 lines. So all I've done is open the compass, an unspecified amount, stabbed it in A and drawn a little curve across the 2 things. Now what else could I do? So if you're sitting there tomorrow in the exam thinking, well, what shall I do next? Have a guess. There's not a great deal you can do. Well, I could put the point there, and if I put the point there, oh, that's useful. That sends me into the middle of the angle. What shall I do now? Well, I haven't used that. Okay, see what happens if I stick the point there. Oh, that's useful. I've got something now I can draw a line through. Okay, and what that line does is it cuts that angle exactly in half. So the point P is equidistant from line AB and line AC. That means point P is on that line somewhere. I know it's 6 centimeters from B. Now, 6 centimeters from B is going to be part of a circle, 6 centimeters radius. So I'm going to put the compass point on my ruler at 0 and open the compass. Now I do have to measure because they've given me a specific measurement of 6 centimeters. So I open my compass at 6 centimeters and it's 6 centimeters from B. So I put my point on B and I draw part of a circle. So I've gone mad and I've gone into question 12. That doesn't matter. But what does matter is that I haven't drawn this line long enough. So my point P is on that line, and it's also, in order for it to be 6 centimeters from B, it's also got to be on the circle. So if it's on the line and on the circle, it could be there, or it could be there, because both of those points are equidistant from A, B and C because they're on that line, and exactly 6 centimetres from B because they're on the circle. So the last condition is more than 10 centimetres from point A. So more than 10 centimetres from point A means it's got to be beyond that point on the line. That's less than 10 centimetres. That's more. So that's my point P. So 3 marks there. 1 mark will be for the angle bisector. So even if you couldn't do anything else, you get 1 mark for cutting the angle in half. 1 mark for drawing the 6 centimetre circle. And 1 mark then for eliminating that because it's got to be beyond 10 centimetres. So if you practiced your loci, that's quite a nice question. Share £720 in the ratio of 2 to 7. So you have to be clear when you're working with ratio, is the figure they're giving you the whole value or part of the value? In this one, it's the whole value. They aren't saying the largest part is 720. They're saying we've got to divide that in. So we do 2 and 7 to find the number of parts. So I've got 9 equal parts that I've got to divide 720 into. 9 into 7 doesn't go. 9 into 72, you need to know your 9 times table. 9 eighths are 72. So each part is £80. So the first part is 2 lots of 80, which is 160. And the second part is 7 lots of 80, 7 eighths are 56. So £560. There'll be a method mark there for doing the 720 divided by 9, and an answer mark for your right ratios. Reciprocal just means 1 over. Okay, so I'll show you 2 different ways of doing this. Reciprocal of 0.2 means 1 over 0.2. But you wouldn't leave it like that. What you could do, if I wrote that as 1.0, which is the same as 1, over 0.2, and then I timesed both of those by 10, I'd get 10 on top, 1 times 10, and on the bottom I'd get 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the reciprocal of 0.2 is 5. Another way of doing it is to write that as a fraction. 0.2 is 2/10, and then turn that upside down. So 2/10, the reciprocal, means you switch it upside down, so you end up with 10 over 2, which is 5. So there'd be 1 mark there if you manage to get 1 over 0.2, just the trigger that it's reciprocal, and then 1 mark for evaluating it as 5. Right, now this is really unusual because we've got a circle question on a non-calculated paper. The diagram below shows an empty cylinder with radius 10 centimeters and height 20. Using pi equals 3.14, calculate the volume of the cylinder. So my brain is now thinking, hang on, I wrote that down when I got into the exam. So the volume is pi r squared h. So the volume is pi times r squared, which is the radius, times the height. Pi, they're telling me I can't use the button on my calculator, but I can replace it with 3.14. 10 squared is 100 times 20. So if they're going to give you a pi question on the non-calculated paper, they're going to make it easy for you to deal with. Something's going to come to 100, because 3.14 times 100 is 314. So now I've just got to do 314 times 20. Well, 314 times 2 would be 628. And then, because I'm timesing it by 20, we'd add a 0. It's not asking for the units, but it could ask for the units, and the units of volume would be centimetres cubed. Bless you. What is the greatest whole number of litres that this cylinder can hold? So one of the key things that you're required to remember, and I don't write this on the front because it should be something that's drilled into you, is 1 litre is 1,000 cubic centimetres. So that's going to be 6.28 litres. So the greatest whole number of litres would be 6. Because if you try to pour 7 in, it would overflow. So there'd be 1 mark there for correctly filling in the formula, 1 mark for working it out without a calculator, and 1 mark for turning that into litres. Question 14, I'm going to leave until the end, because that's the one where I'm going to be thinking, oh God, which numbers could it be? So I look at that and I think, right, that's one I'm going to leave till the end. 15, indices. Unlikely that you will have had a revision lesson on these, but let's see if we can figure them out. Circle the correct answer for each of the following statements. The square root of 7 to the power of 4 is equal to one of those. So to the power of 4 means you multiply by itself 4 times. So what you're doing is the square root of 7 times the square root of 7 times the square root of 7 times the square root of 7. If you square a square root, you're undoing it. You're cancelling it out. So the square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is 7. Square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is 7. So what you're doing there is actually 7 times 7, which is 49. Okay, squaring and square rooting are opposites. This is a law of indices. Anything to the power of 0 is 1. The more common guess there would be 0. If you multiply by 0, you get 0, but the power of 0 is 1. Here, as I said earlier, squaring and square rooting are opposites, so they cancel each other out. So the square root of 3 squared is 3. The square root of 5 squared is 5. So that comes to 15. A negative power is reciprocal. So 3 to the negative 4 is the same as 1 over 3 to the 4, which is the same as 1 over 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 9 times 9, which is 81. I really wouldn't worry too much about these if they aren't something that you're familiar with. And then the final law of indices is I know I can write 4 as 2 squared. So that's the same as 2 squared times 2 to the 28, which is the same as 2. When the bases are the same, you can add their powers. So that becomes the same as 2 to the power of 30. So n is 30. So 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that, 1 mark for writing 4 as 2 squared, and 1 mark for then getting the value of 30. Question 16. This is, we're into grade B now. That last question was grade B. This is very much grade B. I know we've done this in class, Some of you may not. A, B and C are points on the circumference of a circle with centre O. ACB is 74 degrees. Calculate the value of x. So we're trying to work that out. As soon as you see a circle with a shape like this in, if you've got this sort of Star Trek-y arrowhead thing going on, that angle there is half the angle on the inside, or the angle on the inside is twice that. So if that's 74, I know that this in here is double it, which is 148. Now, calculate the value of x. You must state any angle property of a circle that you use. So we've got to say angle AOB equals twice angle ACB. And then the angle property would be angle at centre is twice angle at circumference. Now, if you can't remember that, but you just spot that, that's fine. You're going to be penalised a mark, but you're gaining marks in the grade B part. Okay, so I'm now inside this triangle, and O is the centre of the circle. So O to A is the radius of the circle, and O to B must also be the radius of the circle, which means that I have an isosceles triangle, because they are both radii, they're both radiuses of the circle. So now that I know it's an isosceles triangle, I know that these two bottom angles here are going to be the same. So if I do 180 take away 148, I get that these two must add up to 32, and because I know they add up to 32 and they're the same, x is going to be 16 degrees. So, 1 mark for, let's figure this out, 1 mark for 148, which is the angle property from the circle. Then there's a method mark and an answer mark for working inside the isosceles triangle and getting 16. And then there's a final mark for explaining what angle property you're using. So even if you can't explain it, you're going to get 3 out of 4. But as I said, we're into grade B land. Question 17, relative frequency. We have done this. A biased 6-sided dice is thrown a total of 1,000 times. The graph shows the relative frequency of throwing a 6 after 200, 400, 600, 800 and 1,000 throws. Which of the following is the best estimate for the probability of throwing a 6? So the best estimate is always going to be after the most repeated trials. So the most repeated trials is 1,000. So the best estimate of the probability is going to be 0.32. How many 6s were thrown in the first 600 throws of the dice? So 600 throws. At this point, the relative frequency was 0.34. Okay, so I've gone on my graph at 600, and I've read across that value there. So the probability is 0.34, so we multiply that then by the number of throws. Well, that's the same, depending on how you want to figure this, as writing 6 times 100, because then I can use that 100 to times by the 0.34, so that's going to be the same as 34 lots of 6. And I'm doing all of that faff because I'm not allowed to use a calculator. So 34 times 6. 4 6s are 24, 18, 19, 204. So you may have your own strategy for doing 0.34 times 600, which is fine, so long as you get 204. How many more 6s were recorded for these 600 throws than you would expect when a fair 6-sided dice is thrown 600 times? Well, for a fair 6-sided dice, the chances of you getting a 6 would be 1 in 6. So 1 in 6 times 600 is 100. So a fair dice, you would expect a 6 to come up 100 times. On this biased dice, it comes up 204 times, so 104 more times. Relative frequency is not a difficult topic to learn. You could go home tonight, pick that up from your notes, and in a quarter of an hour you'll be able to answer any question. Question 18. A cuboid has sides x, 5 and 7 centimetres. The total surface area of the cuboid is 142 square centimetres. So cuboid. There's my cuboid. It's got side x, 5 and 7. So it's the way that I've drawn it, looks like that. So if we were talking about its volume, I'd be doing x times 5 times 7. But I'm not talking about its volume, I'm talking about its surface area, which is the total area of all of its surfaces. So if we look at this, if that's 7, it's 7, the height of the box is 7 everywhere. So if we consider the front of that, the area of that front is going to be x times 7, which is 7x. And because it's cuboid, it's got two faces with that area, the front and the back. So that plus another 7x gives me the surface area of the front and the back. Then I've got this end here, which is going to be 5 times 7, which is 35. And there are two of those. There's the left end and the right end. And then I've got the top of the box. The top of the box is going to be x times 5, which is 5x. And the bottom will have the same area. So the surface area of that cuboid is going to be all of that added together. And I know that that comes to 142. Now I can simplify that because I'm good at algebra. Okay, this line of algebra is back in the first half of the paper. 5x and 5x is 10x. And 7x is 17x, and 7x is 24x. Plus 35 and 35 is 70, equals 142. I want to solve that for x, so I want to get rid of the 70 by taking 70 off each side. Leaves me 24x on this side and 72 on this side. To get the x on its own, I have to divide by 24. 24 goes into 72 3 times. So x equals 3. So as the final question in the paper, that's not a bad question. One of the papers we did last week was a simultaneous equation with that, which was horrible. But we've still got that one question that I skipped because I didn't want to run out of time in the exam. So if we go back to question 14. 5 numbers are listed below. Write down another set of 5 positive whole numbers, so whole numbers, such that all the numbers are less than 20. The median of the new set of numbers is greater than the median of the set shown above. Well, the median of the set shown above median is the middle, they're in order, is 6. The mean of the new set of numbers is less than the mean of the set shown above. Well, I need to find the total of those. So I've got 28, 34, 40. So the mean will be 40 divided by 5, which is 8. The range of the new set of numbers is less than the range of the set shown above, and that's going to be 15 take away 3 is 12. So the numbers that I'm going to put in here have to be all less than 20. The median has to be bigger than 6. They've got to add up to a number less than 40, and the range has to be less than 12. So there's nothing in there to talk about mode, so it doesn't matter if I've got more numbers repeating themselves. So if I help myself here by saying, well, if I've got 3 numbers that are 10, that means that the median is 10, so my median is greater than 6. They're all going to be less than 20, and because they've got to add up to less than 40, these two have got to be adding up to less than 10. If I've got a highest value of 10, and the range has got to be smaller than 12, then that could be 3. So now I've got, the median is 10. The total, in order to make 40, that would have to be 7, except it must be less than 40, so I go for 6. 10, 20, 30, 36, 39. The range has got to be less than the range. The range has got to be less than 12, and the range is 7. So those aren't the only answers, but those meet all the requirements. The most important thing is to remember, if they give you the mean, you can find the total. So any of those questions where you've got to find the list of numbers, remember, if they give you the mean, you times it by however many numbers there are, and that gives you the total, which is what you work with. Okay, so that is it.